thank you for braving the rain and the typical, not that typical, the New Orleans weather to actually be here this afternoon. I actually thought this morning because I didn't wake up that long ago. Hard night, you know, tells the cocktail. But thank you guys for giving me the time to be with us, which, well, for me it's going to be a momentous occasion. It's a chance for rum families, rum friends to talk about a spirit category that we love so much, which is rum. As such, and as some of you know, rum is a much maligned category. It's also a category that we do love to, we love and loathe at the same time. We're frustrated with it, but at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason, which is to make the best rum, to make sure our consumers enjoy our rums, and for the rum sales to keep on growing and beat up vodka. I will. Oh, thank you. I have just a couple of bit of house rules just before we start. Make sure we've got clickers. There isn't a fire alarm scheduled for today, so if you do hear the alarm, that means there really is a fire. I know there's a lot of water outside, but the fire exit's there, and it's ladies first, rum ambassador second, and everyone else after that. Okay, that will look perfect. So yes, rum. I love rum, as some of you know. I love rum. Why? Because it has no rules and regulations. Yes. Yeah, you guys are looking at me like you chat rubbish here. No, but it's, as a global ambassador for the category, this is what I hear a lot of when I travel around the world to all 7 continents. But I actually didn't hear it in Antarctica because they were just happy they had rum. But in the other 6 continents, you hear that a lot from bartenders, consumers, spirit lovers, other spirit lovers. They say, yeah, rums, I like rums, or I love rums because it has no rules and regulations. And so it's a bit frustrating, so I wanted to put a panel together, a presentation together to find out if we can come to some agreement to help educate consumers, help educate fellow bartenders and industry people, and each other, because we're all about sharing. That's one of the reasons why I love rum, because it is that spirit of sharing. It was created for fun. It wasn't created as medicine like that spirit in Europe. That was then redistilled with some juniper berries. No, it wasn't. It was created as medicine. It was created for fun. So rum is a fun spirit, and I think that's what we should really take from this category. But I couldn't do it by myself, so I had to bring the heavyweights in, and Richardson, the heavyweights, in to discuss and share and take your questions, because this is about you and for you to actually ask the panel. We also have some other esteemed guests as well ask the panel about the rum category and how we can push it forward from this one perspective. Rules and regulations, the debate. Does rum have rules and regulations, and is there a way for us to actually further the industry? So I'm going to introduce the panel. Starting all the way from my far left over here, we have a guy that needs no introduction. He's, for me, he's the first time I met this guy a few years back in London, and I said to him, you know what, your brands were one of the first brands I could actually go into a bar and say, try this from this country, try that from that country, try that from another country. Why? Because they only had limited amount of space on their shelf for about 2 or 3 or maybe 4 rums. So they didn't want to order one brand here, one brand, they didn't want to stick with one brand. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Alexandre Gabriel, the owner of Maison Ferrand, favorite gin, cognac, and plantation. Next, we have well, another lady that needs no introduction. Oh wow, thank you. Oh, you know who it was?
I don't think anyone in Rome has any idea who I am.
All right. See, I knew he was going to do something like this. This is why I'm not talking about Nicole. I know you probably go woo as well. Put them in different orders, just confuse Maggie. Anyway, so I met this lady a long time ago. Not that long ago, but yeah, in the late 90s when I did my only rum ambassador job for one brand, Bina Julieta. I worked a little bit with a rum called Appleton, Ray Nephew, a company called Ray Nephew, and this lady came over to London with the actual master blender at the particular time, and I tried to, young, brash Londoner, I was trying to really con her in a blending session. This lady organized a blending session where they had different marks of their rums, and they get bartenders to blend their rums and create their own version of Appleton. as such, and then she'll smell and taste them and actually say, yeah, that's not bad, that's not bad. So I was like, hey, my favorite rum is Appleton 12. So I just poured the Appleton 12 in a bottle. That was it. I'm gonna win this, I'm gonna win this. So this lady was sniffing and tasting and sampling the rums, like 20 different samples, and then she picked out one rum and said, who's Ian? I was like, yes, it's me, I'm the winner. She was like, which actually means in Jamaican, what are you trying to do? She picked out her own rum from all these samples, and yeah, it was the last time I ever tried to con the world famous, the first female master blender in the spirits industry, and a great friend of mine as well, Auntie Dr. Joy Spence. And another person that needs no introduction, well, no one really here needs introductions, you're all famous, you're all legends. But this person needs no introduction, only because his views on rums are worldwide. I was in some little tiny city in China, south of China, talking about rums, and I was saying this and saying this, and they're like, no, but this is not Foursquare. I'm like, what? How did you hear about that over here? Internet. Ministry of Rum. Like, oh my God, what Ministry of Rum? But no, this guy is here as a revolutionizing the rum industry with smallish batch, because a lot of people here in the States complain, we don't get enough of these rums. His maverick approach to the category is also seen as the right approach or the wrong approach, depending on which corner you're in. But have to agree, he makes some good rums, although I don't really tell him that much because Jamaican rums are superior to rums from Barbados.
You would think he's a Jamaican.
Oh yeah. And that's how we met. We were arguing over which rums was better. And he was like, oh, that overproof rum is terrible. But that was a few years ago. But without further ado, I want to introduce to Mr. Richard Seale from the Foursquare Distillery in Barbados. And another legend, and I'm even more thrilled. I know Auntie Joy is great, Rich is great, Alexandre's great, but I've always wanted to work with this lady here because she's just legend. Now you can say more, honey.
I root for both.
Oh, see, okay. So when I read up about this lady, I was like, my God, she's done enough. I haven't done anything inside the industry yet. And she's just brought loads of whiskey lovers to the table, depending on what style of whiskey you like, whether it's bourbon or Irish whiskey, or craft stills. In fact, let me just read out her resume. The master distiller of the Cascade Hollow Distilling Company, graduated from Manhattan College with major in chemistry, chemical engineering, oh, I like joy. New York Times dubbed her Bourbon's Master of Craft in 2014. Most recently served as a project commissioned engineer of the Tullamore. They make some good Irish whiskey. Tullamore Dew Distillery, founding president of the New York State Distillers Guild. Wow, how did you have time for that?
2014.
There's not enough time in the day. And founding member and the American Craft Spirits Association, the co-chair of the Legislative Convention of the State Guild Committee. You've done too much. Give a big hand to the legendary Nicole Austin. Some of you are saying, but she doesn't make rum. That's one of the reasons why I brought her here. She will be soon. But whiskey's okay, because you guys have some good barrels. We need those, because we don't cut trees down in the Caribbean. Right, so, and final, last but not least, I have to have this guy on the panel. Why? Because I want to be in one of his movies. That's one of the reasons why he's here. But he also has a delicious rum, and coming from the perspective of a brand owner that buys rums from the Caribbean and brings it to the masses, the American audience, so they can taste, sip, and savor some beautiful rums from that little tiny island the size of a cricket pitch called Barbados. And if you don't know what cricket is, ask someone who's English, they'll tell you it's very small, but Barbados is a small island. But anyway, this guy has also won 5, is it 7 or 5? 7, always robbing for 2. 7 Emmy Awards for his films and documentaries, especially the one on the real McCoy, William McCoy, the original rum runner, which I try to emulate when I smuggle rum into America, especially Cuban rums. So give a big hand to Mr. Bailey Breyer. finally, me. I just drink rum, so that's the reason why I'm here. It's just like feelings, I like it. And as you know in my quotes, don't tell me what rum I should drink, and I won't tell you how to sleep with your wife. Guys and girls, yeah, I drink what I want. So that's my motto. So I'm, yes, me, Ian Burrell, the rum ambassador. And we do have a little bit of help from some of the friends. Over here on our right-hand side and dotted around, we have some VIPs that will contribute to this debate, conversation. Everyone from Ben Jones, Ian Porter. You don't have to clap for these guys, because you can if you want. Ben Jones, Ian Porter from Ben. Nelson Henning, there's the master blender at Lisa, the making of international runs. Maddie Campbell, Matt Pitchard, spokesperson for Worst Fire, West Regards, Spirits, Karen Hoskins, I know where she is, she's over here. Oh, well, we also have other contributors. Look at that, what's Shannon? She better be here, she can learn some more runs. Who else we got? Oh, we also got these crazy three people. I also love runs. I'll tell you all about it. Jack Paul, and Tequila. Right, so let's get on to the debate. Rum is like the Wild Wild West. You know that, don't you? Well, that's what everyone says. I actually used to see that as quotes from journalists. Rum is like the Wild Wild West. And I was like, what do they mean? It means like everyone just does their own thing. You can get away with this, you can get away with that, you can add that to rum, so we can sell it as rum. I mean, that sounds like spice rum to me as a category, but everyone lumpers everything into the same category. But why? Why do we do that? Why do we do that, especially here in the US as such? So, I mean, one of the reasons why I see is because, you know, rum is made all over the world, and if something is made all over the world, everyone will have their different interpretations and different understandings of what rum really is. I mean, some of the notable countries, I just here, Australia, Portugal, Austria, my goodness, well, that's not really rum. But anyway, they do import some molasses out there and make stuff. And everywhere from New Zealand, which is where I launched my career in 2003, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, and United Kingdom, all these countries are making rum. And then we go to see menus around the world, and they're labeled in these, now I see defunct categories of light, and golden, and dark. If you go to a bar or restaurant and you see rums labeled as light, golden, dark, bitch slap the manager. Slap them. Because what does it say about the? It doesn't say anything about rum, it just says colour. That's all it says. It doesn't say anything about it. You can have a light rum with loads of caramel to make it dark and look old. You can have a 10-year-old rum that looks like urine. So it depends on the barrels you're using, depends on where you age them and such. So forget about that light, golden, dark. We even have rums described and categorized by their origins. The French style, the Spanish style, the English style, which is, again, a lot easier, I suppose, to describe to consumers. And remember, 95% of bars, especially here in the States, are still pouring Raz as one of their premium rums. Is anyone from Cardi here? Great product! But there are a lot of bars still pouring that, and that's for rum. So the level of knowledge may not be there, so we still have a lot of work to go on. But using that as a base, yeah, especially when you talk about the historical connection of how rums are made, the French, the English, the Spanish, and also don't forget the Portuguese, that they were making sugarcane spirit, which may have evolved into rum. And then if we go to places in Europe, we have Madeira, they're making what they call Portuguese rum or Madeira rum from fresh sugarcane juice, similar to what happens in the French Caribbean. So that's another way we see around the world how rums are described. A classification, we also see this used to separate and categorize rums about how they're distilled, comparing, say, a single rum, a pot distilled rum from one distillery to a single malt. Again, single whiskey from a single distillery, single blends, traditional. So again, we see this around the world using to describe and categorize rums. This can be confusing to the general consumer. It can be confusing to the experts. And there are a few experts that do agree, but don't want to give it its own twist. So again, is there ever going to be a common consensus on how rums will be classified around the world? We have Worstbar in the Caribbean. Again, they tried to get all the rum companies in the Caribbean together to preach the gospel according to authentic Caribbean rum. I worked with them in 2008 when they first got their European budgets. It was frustrating sometimes because there were so many different messages within the Caribbean as such. So again, how's that gonna impart in the consumers out there that we want to get into the rum category and drink our amazing sugarcane spirit? So when I used to always talk about rums to my guests, I used to always talk about from the country, because I see it in other categories. I see it in whiskey. We talk about regions, we talk about countries where they're made. Why can't we talk about that with rums, the origins? Should we be defining rums by the origins? We have beautiful Martinique rum, we've got Cuban rum, both 12 years old, both completely different styles of rums. But if you know the rules in Martinique, you know the rules in Cuba, you could possibly make an informed opinion of what's in the bottle before you jump in there. Guyana, Guadeloupe, the Guadeloupeans, anyone from Guadeloupe here? I know the Guadeloupes have a little bit of battle with the Martinique guys. You guys make the best rum in French Caribbean, don't you, Martinique guys? Yes? No? Okay. Oui, they do. That's what they said to me in Guadeloupe. But yeah, you have 12-year-old rums. From there you have Guyana, again, slightly different interpretations of rum from say, Puerto Rico and Antigua. See, Puerto Rico have rules. I mean, a lot of people don't even know that Bacardi Carta Blanca has to be aged for a minimum of 1 year in oak, an American oak. So the biggest selling white rum in the world is an aged rum that's been aged for a minimum of 1 year. That's just because the rules in Puerto Rico. So if we know that about Puerto Rico, we can make informed opinions about some of their rums before we dive into the bottle. As such, I always like the notion that I could take a bottle of J. Ray Nephew, unaged Jamaican rum to Puerto Rico and give that to my Puerto Rican friends. And I say, Ian, it's aguardiente, it's shit. Where it's the biggest selling rum in Jamaica, as such. And then I can take a bottle of Bacardi to a Jamaican and they'll just shoot me or shoot at me because that's not rum. To a Jamaican. It's rules, regulations, interpretations, both rums, but from different countries. Jamaica and Barbados, of course, seen as some of the stalwarts of the rum industry because of the history and heritage behind those islands and making those rums. Both islands use, for example, minimum aging. So you see a 12 on a bottle of Real McCoy, you see a 12 on a bottle of Appleton. You know the youngest drop is 12 years old. The youngest drop. There is no Solera. There's a swear word in Jamaica, apparently. There is no average aging. We don't do the average aging out there. You can put 99% of a 100-year-old rum inside a bottle of Jamaican and Barbados rum and put 1% of a 1-year-old. You have to call it 1 year old. Yeah, so that's another thing that confuses consumers out there. The age claim. I mean, just my little soapbox moment. No offense if anyone has a Solera brand that has an age claim on there. I think it's marketing bullshit. You're just trying to con the customers to believe you have an older product. But that's just my soapbox moment. You still make some delicious rums, some of you. Oh, thank you. Oh, cheers. Oh, someone likes it. I like the fact that the movie guy claps because it means I might have a chance. I want to be in Avengers, yeah. I'm just waiting for you to get that nod. So, should we look at individual territories to guide us about their rums? Because I'm sure some of you don't realize that when we buy rums here in the States, did you know it's not a real category compared to some of the other spirits out there? It's just crazy. I mean, look at this. The definition of whiskey to the TTB. Spirit distilled from fermented mash grain, less than 95% alcohol, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's the definition of whiskey. This is the definition of brandy. A spirit distilled from fermented juice, mash and wine, blah, 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 95% alcohol, 190 proof. Yeah. Nice and simple, nice and clear. Rum! A spirit distilled from fermented sugarcane syrup, sugarcane molasses, sugarcane byproducts at less than 95%. Pretty much similar. Oh, sorry. Having to taste the aroma and characteristics generally attributed to rum, bottled not less than 40%. Must smell and taste like rum, in other words. What does rum smell and taste like in Jamaica? Rum. What does rum smell and taste like in Venezuela? Rum. And what does rum in French Caribbean? We. No, don't read that way. But when we go through the categories and we break down these sub-categories and classifications, look at whiskey. So you go into a store and you say, right, whiskey has to be made this way because of the TTB rules. But then it breaks it down. Bourbon whiskey, different from rye whiskey, and it tells you the definition of bourbon whiskey. Produced at a certain rate, less than has to be 51% corn if it's bourbon. You got rye, I don't even drink much rye. Anyone drink rye whiskey here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a significant flavor difference in rye and corn?
Yeah.
Is there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. I'm glad you makes it even more compelling. Yeah, so at least you know what you're getting when you buy rye here in America. We can even break it down even more. Wheat whiskey, malt whiskey, rye malt whiskey, corn whiskey. It breaks it down to tell you exactly what they are. Straight whiskey, straight rye whiskey, so many different types of whiskeys, but they take the time to break it down. Then we go to the international stuff, because you guys like to import some products. I know that there's a guy in some little tiny office down in Washington that wants to put extra tariffs on products coming out of Scotland. So the Scots are not happy, but who cares? Because Irish whiskey's better. Scotch whiskey, unblended whiskey, manufactured in Scotland, in compliance with the laws of the United Kingdom. What's that mean? It means whatever the Scots say Scotch whiskey is, that's what the Americans adhere to. Simple. Blended Scotch whiskey or Scotch blended. Yeah, look to Scotland, they'll tell you what it is. Irish whiskey. Go to Ireland and Northern Ireland and they'll tell you what it is, and so on. Even Canada. Any Canadians in the house? Wow, guys. How do you guys get over the wall? Oh, sorry. Anyway, so even Canada, they have their definitions. You know what you're getting when you buy a bottle of whiskey and it says Canadian whiskey on there. If you look to see what the rules and the definition of Canadian whiskey is, you know you're going to get inside.
Sure, you know what you're getting with Canadian whiskey.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. I mean, look at other spirits, because if we look at the spirit category, it can be broken down from sugarcane spirits, which rum is a part of. So is cachaça, Tanger Arak. You got fruits, brandies. You got different types of brandy. So for years, fruit brandies, pisco was sold as brandy. It's not anymore. It's defined as a Peruvian grape brandy. Better known, and they give you the definition. Well, they tell you how it's made, because you look to Peru to find out what pisco is, to find out the differences between that. Let's go to the French, because we have some French contingents. Cognac, a grape brandy. Is it like pisco? Well, it's distilled in Cognac, the Cognac region, compliance with the laws and regulations of the French government. So I can't make cognac in my little Jamaican hut in Maypen, Clarendon, because Alexandre will probably come and slap me in my face and say, Ian, get out of here with that shit. Probably, but I still gotta drink it because it's gonna be delicious. Armagnac, the same, Calvados, which is again one of my favorite spirits, in compliance with the local laws. Rum! It's bad.
Brutal.
It's bad.
Brutal.
But this is our referee as well. Nicole, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? You worked with Irish whiskey, you work with bourbon, you know that you have to follow strict guidelines or loose guidelines to make your products. What do you think about with rum here in the US?
It's looking a little thin.
You're dead right. Damn, it's looking a little thin. Tequila, look, even tequila, spirit distilled in Mexico, compliant with the laws and regulations of the Mexican government. Rum. Because all rums are lumbered in one, I'm gonna get to you, rumbled in one melting pot. So if I get a rum from Jamaica, it's going to be the same or sold as the same as a rum from Barbados. Cuba, well, then you can't get Cuban rums. So I said, we need to have a debate, a rum debate. We need to talk about this in public, not on these silly forums, on Ministry of whatever it's called, Ministry of Fun and Global Rum Clubs, and any of those other little dibby forums that are out there. I just laugh at when I want to joke about it. But no, we need to talk about this and share.
Is it one of those forums yours?
Yeah, but I don't even contribute. I put people together. That's what I do. When I created the world's first international rum fest in 2007, it wasn't for me. It was to get people together, rum people together. And now there are rum festivals all over the world. And they all of them. But some of them say, if it wasn't for Ian Burrell, this might not happen. I'm like, oh, gracias, muchas gracias. So yes, other people put you guys together. So, the rum debate. Rum debate. So we have the G.I. Joes in the house. That top one is Richard, but it's a bit high. Yeah, the G.I. Joes, we're going to be talking about geographical indications, appellations, DOCs. We're going to talk about what happens at source. And should it impart in what we're buying here in America and in America. and in Europe as well. So Joy, we'll talk to Joy first, because Jamaica has just got recently, they have just been granted their GI, their Geographical Indication, and I'm very happy about that, and I want the experts to explain a little bit more about what it is. So let's start off with Joy. Joy, you can share the microphone so Richard holds it. Tell us exactly what a GI is.
Well, a geographical indicator is an indicator that actually creates specific characteristics for a particular product. It has to do with your area of origin and your production processes. And what was happening to Jamaica rum is that we found out that Jamaica rum was being sold on the international market as Jamaica rum that just did not meet our specifications. And so we came together, we started this process actually in 2010. It took us a long journey, many visits by the World Intellectual Property Organization, the Swiss organization, to Jamaica for us to clearly define what our roadmap should be. We came together as a group and defined our characteristics because we found that there was no transparency in the industry. We weren't saying the same message internationally, and that because we're now growing in the premium age rum category, the Jamaican rum producers wanted to have a simple message for the consumer that they can understand what Jamaica rum is all about. So our definitions are such. One, you must use Jamaican limestone filtered water in your fermentation. You must ferment and distill in Jamaica. And before I continue with the GI, while we're in that process of developing the GI, the Jamaican ambassador in the UK actually called me to say she was having a party for a launch of a Jamaica rum in the UK. I will not call the name. And when she told me what the rum was, I said, that's not a Jamaica rum. I said, Ambassador, look at the label and read what you see on it. Fermented and distilled in London. So I said, look, just shut down that party, because that's not a Jamaica rum. So continue with what we declared as our characteristics for Jamaican GI. So you must ferment and distill in Jamaica. If you're going to have an age statement, it must be the minimum age system, which is similar to the Scotch whisky system. Of course, last but not least, no additives in Jamaica rum. And
That's not true, because you do have a rum where you put loads of additives in there, called Ramona.
oh yes, we define it as a rum liqueur.
Oh yes, sorry, my bad.
Not a rum.
My bad.
So years ago, we did have Ramona rum liqueur that had rum in it. But none of the Jamaican producers
Beat up here, man.
on the island add sugar store rum, and we are standing by that cause. And let me tell you something, when Jamaicans come together, nobody can mash us up. So we're adamant that we're going to stay with geographical indicator because we want, as we said, to eliminate the cloudiness and to be very clear about when somebody purchases a bottle of Jamaica rum, they know exactly what they're getting.
That is important, because I just recently saw in an event down in, I think it was in Miami, there was a rum called Naked in Jamaica. By the way, guys, do not put Naked in Jamaica in Google when you're trying to find this rum. Do not. Put Naked in Jamaica rum. And this rum, it won gold medals as like Jamaican rum. And I was like, wow, never heard of it, but yeah, Jamaican rum. Maybe Auntie Joy got involved and made it. I mean, there's a big Trump medal they got a 2018 XP gold. I found out it was distilled in Florida. But consumers are buying and drinking Jamaica rum, so.
Yeah, that's the problem we're having internationally, because Jamaica is known for producing excellent rum, great quality and consistency. And so people piggyback on the word Jamaica rum. So now that we have our GI, we have teeth behind the regulations, and we can actually go and put the rule of law behind these producers who are actually making Jamaica rum internationally, but not adhering to the GI regulations. And so I, would recommend the other Caribbean islands to follow us, to actually have a GI for their rums, identifying their own special DNA for their processes, because it will also help them to be unified and to go globally and spread that message.
Wow. Shots fired.
So the XPs couldn't tell the Jamaican rum?
I don't know. I got sacked as a judge like 8 years ago, or I retired, 1 or 2. But so Joy was talking about Jamaica, with their definition, their identity, their GI. If you're from Jamaica, you're a Jamaican rum, and the consumer should see that and know they fall in line, they fall in compliance with all the rules and regulations in Jamaica because of what it stands for. Just imagine Jamaica was a Scotch whiskey of the rum world. You know what you're going to get when you see a bottle of Scotch. It doesn't mean it's going to taste good, but at least you know they're going to be following guidelines to make that Scotch whiskies. But there are.
Fun fact, actually,
There
Scotch is the only one where you could definitely not get away with that in the whiskey category.
Yeah, no.
So, other ones, the Irish whiskey, like all the other GIs, you could get away with this.
Oh.
But Scotch in particular has an extra layer of protections in the US specifically. You're not allowed to use any words that are even vaguely referential to Scotland on your label anywhere, and even in cases where you could prove that like you're actually in a place called like Glen whatever, you still aren't going to get away with putting it on that label. So Scotch is unique in whiskey and having this extra layer, and that's even above and beyond the GI. That itself doesn't get you. You can still get away with this with a lot of other GIs.
Yeah, my uncle Glenn tried to do Glenn Burrell. He tried to do this whiskey, and they stopped him because Glenn sounded too much like Glenn Fitting, Glenn Vargas, Glenn this.
The Scotch Whisky Association called me when I registered my first label in the United States because I labeled it the real McCoy. And they called me and said, you can't do that. And they said, yeah, McCoy is a Scottish name, so you can't call anything with a Scottish name unless it comes from Scotland. I said, it's a rum from Barbados.
And it probably was a Scot.
And they said, all right, you can do it, but you can't make any whiskey. You can only make rum. Okay, great. So we're all friends in Scotland. That's a true story.
I do apologise for his Irish accent that he did there. But there are some rums that are out there that do have these rules and regulations, especially in Europe, that we recognise. Rums from the Caribbean. I want to bring in Ben from Martinique, representing Clement and JM. What do you stand on this whole appellation or geographical indication of rum, especially from a Martinique perspective?
Well, I've been a privileged spectator in this nice debate so far. And I speak from privilege because of the badge you see up there on the screen. That's the AOC of Martinique, which, as Joy was talking about a little bit with Jamaica, has a very, very long, tiresome list of rules and regulations of what is Martinique rum, how it's made. For sure, the sugar is from Martinique, fermentation, distillation, aged, bottled. We also make rum liqueur, Creole shrub, and orange liqueur, and we make it in Martinique with Martinique rum and Martinique product. And we're not allowed to put Martinique on the bottle because it's not AOC or Coca. We are not allowed to say Martinique on the bottle unless it's in the address of where we are.
Oh, right, okay.
Exactly. So we understand very well the rules and why they're there. No problem. People know Creole shrub or Mina Coco from Clement, and we know it's from Martinique, but that's just one added point. I don't know how you say with rum, if it's Jamaican liqueur or whatever. But in any way, we are in this privileged position that we have the defense already for there, and for sure. We probably have to do a better job here in the US because as Agricole is associated with the best quality rum in the world, some other producers like to use that word and put it on their
What rubbish is this guy talking about? Molasses all the way.
So we also need to, we have this privilege, we have this stamp, we have this approval, and we need to use it better to defend this position that's already there.
So you're saying the TTB allow rums made in the US to use the word agricole and illegally in your eyes?
Well, no one is policing, no one's enforcing, and as you saw in 2 or 3 slides previously, it's bare, it's naked. So it's now our responsibility to just as you saw with Cognac, must be made according to the way the Cognac sees it is. We should probably hurry up and get ourselves organized and get that done before we see more Minnesota rum alcohol, California rum alcohol.
Excellent. Most sense Ben has come out with in a long time. So Jamaica has their GI, Martinique has their appellation. Should the world's oldest rum producer, because you haven't got a GI yet, should the world's rum producers, do you need a GI or an appellation? Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that because I know Dave Wondrich is buzzing around. He says, rum wasn't made in Barbados, rum was made in India and the Far East and places like that. So let me just rephrase that. Does the world's oldest producer of sugarcane distillate, affectionately called rum bullion, before being condensed and given to the world, do they need, condensed into the word rum from rum bullion, do they need an appellation or GI?
Absolutely.
One word answer. Tell us why do they? Besides, I'm well, naked in Barbados.
Well, it's this great irony where we keep hearing people write that none of the countries, rum has no rules, or none of the countries will ever sit down and agree on a universal rule for rum, as if we are trying to do this. This, of course, is complete nonsense. But most people who make this statement don't actually realize that if you're here in the US, we all have to conform to that one single rule. So that's where we're living, and what we're actually trying to do is the complete opposite, just like the deference that's given to brandy and whiskey, and actually have the fact that we have an identity in Barbados, please recognize it. We have an identity in Jamaica, please recognize it. And yes, it's all about semantics. It's all about when you pick up a bottle of Barbados rum, you know what you're getting. And it's all about linking it to the island. So, this is why, some of these requirements, they're kind of non-negotiable because they're a part of the geographic link. And if you break those links, you may have rum, but you don't have Barbados rum, or you don't have Jamaican rum. So that's the key. So we want those geographic links so that when you see Barbados rum, it really is of Barbados, and it really is protected the way we do the rums we do.
I found this online somewhere, a secret place, and these are some of the requirements or certification that you guys are looking for in Barbados to define your rums. Can you go through? It says only E158. What is E158?
That's the caramel color.
Okay. So you allowed to use caramel color for consistency of color for your rums.
Correct. In other words, sometimes when people talk about caramel, they think it's a free-for-all, but it's not intended to be a free-for-all. It has to be limited to the original cask color. If not, it has to be declared, and it's limited to its use in aged rum. If it's used in unaged rum, it has to be declared. And of course, it cannot, and this is actually a regulation over in Europe for all spirits, it cannot be allowed to adjust the flavor. Yeah, no, this is the, I just want to make clear, this is not the Barbados GI.
Okay.
This is the position of Force Spirit Mount Gay and Nicholas Abbey.
Right. Okay. So this is not.
But just to get back to your point about why Barbados needs to have a GI, and I like to give two illustrations at this point, or a couple of illustrations at this point. One that I think is really good and very clear is take Mount Gay, for example. So at one point they were owned by an American company, and at that time the rum was fermented and distilled in Barbados, and then it was shipped out in bulk and bottled overseas, and it was low end. Then Remy took over, invested in stocks, invested in the island, moved all the bottling to the island. And they did all this because they had the right ethos of the company. They didn't know of any other way. They saw an artisanal producer, and they knew it was a value producer, and they knew they had something really good. And this was in their nature, the idea of that you would ship it in bulk and bottle it somewhere else, or ship it somewhere else and age something else, was totally antithetical to their culture. And so Barbados is very lucky. They grew export sales and grew employment in Barbados and all of these things. And so when you talk about a GI, it's about making us not get lucky. It's about putting in so that's the only way to do it. Because one of the things that is lost in the GI argument, we tend to be focused a lot about regulation or protection of quality, but it's an economic argument. And one of the things that the Caribbean has suffered so much for 400 years of colonialism is that everything leaves as a commodity. Whether it's rum, whether it's sugar, whether it's molasses, whether it's bauxite, leaves as a commodity to the value is added outside. And so take my family business. Yes, again, we do it the only way for us, which is normal and natural. So we, age in Barbados, we bottle in Barbados. So, we only employ people in Barbados. This is, for us, is different. But suppose, again, like so many of the businesses in the Caribbean, suppose they're sold, suppose, we sell out to non-Barbadian. What's to protect the reversal of all of that? What's to protect a corporate decision that comes in and says, you know what, we're going to age outside because it's cheaper. We're going to bottle outside because it's cheaper. The protection is the GI. That's what the protection is. And over in Jamaica, Campari's coming in, invested in Jamaica, but they've totally embraced the GI. But the beauty of it is you're laying down a marker for the future. It doesn't matter who owns a Scotch whiskey brand. They have to, it's a protection of and beyond ownership. Okay. So I'm in an unusual position of being the last of the historic Barbadian families in rum. And for me, if in my time we establish a GI that protects it forevermore, that would be a really, really good legacy.
So the GI is just to protect your company. And just to protect you, selfish kid.
So yeah, these are the issues, and the thing to understand is they say you need to have a geographic link. And when you think of rum or spirit making, there are four ways you link to your geography. One, obviously, is you grow the sugarcane. Well, we haven't restricted that because Barbados doesn't have enough sugarcane. The second one is the water. We haven't restricted that to the water. The third one is yeast. Well, yeast, unfortunately, one cat has got out of the bag, so we're adding Saccharomyces yeast. So what we've done is we said, okay, we're going to draw the line there, we're allowing Saccharomyces yeast, but all other yeast have to be native yeast. And then fourthly, as a GI, again, it's geographic link. The fourth link, of course, is where you age. And so, again, we're tying that. So geographically, it's not about regulation or constraining, it's about definition. You are of Barbados if you have these links. If you break all four of these links, you are not of Barbados anymore.
Okay. Similar to what we expect for Scotch whiskey, and more importantly, bringing Alexandre here because he's the only person on the panel here that is linked to Scotland. Well, unless you have a Scotch whiskey, do you? Not yet. Oh, soon come. Unless you might have a Scotch whiskey soon. Linked to Alexandre's the only person here linked to Barbados, Jamaica, and one of the other areas that is revered inside here in the US, Cognac. What's your take on the protection of Cognac, and of course from a rum perspective, being involving Barbados rum and Jamaican rum as well?
Thank you, Ian. Well, some of you may know that I've been invited here probably as the troublemaker, right? So I'm going to jump in.
I'm the only troublemaker that's here.
So, first of all, I think that the GI is important. I totally agree with what Joyce said about the fact there must be an identity of origin, that cheating should be impossible or limited by GI putting together. So I think that's important, and I think we agree on this. Now, being part of the Cognac GI board, I know that what you put in the GI is very important. And there's a gentleman, I forgot his name, but that's the person that represents all the agricultural GI in Europe community, once said at a WORSPA meeting that was consulting, this is the man that actually takes care of all the GI for Europe. He says, really think hard when you put it in Europe, because you're going to have to live in for it for with it for 30 years.
For how long?
30 years.
30 years.
So, I'm 53, so I'm thinking 30 years, 83, we'd rather do it right. So really what it is what we put in the GI. And to me, there's really 4 principles that we should live by first. A, and I think some of these elements are there that we put before, is respect the cane. So anything is made from sugar cane, but the character of the cane should be there, and anything that's within cane should be related to cane. For example, 150A. 150A is burnt sugar, carbonized sugar. Can be made with, a lot of it is made, for example, with beet sugar.
What?
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage distillers to make sure that it's actually not beet sugar cane, but it's actually not it's beet sugar, but actually caramel made with sugar cane. So respect the cane. And also don't distill too high because you raise the cane. So all the elements that are added to the product should be related to cane, like no beet sugar caramel, for instance. And if it is sugar, and you know where I stand there, and I'm willing to elaborate, it should be related to the cane. The second aspect is transparency. I think we have consumers out there, and I'm glad about that, more and more demanding about what's in there, how it's made, and also very curious and interested by the diversity of rum. So that transparency, it's like I often say, don't tell me, what to do, but let me tell you what we do, and so that transparency is important, and the consumer can choose. So to me, that's also one of the 4 pillars. Another pillar is really to study and understand the tradition and the heritage, that are there, that are native to different cultures.
Yeah.
We are doing, if we talk about Cognac, for example, we realize that what was done in 1945 when the AOC was put together, some things were left by the wayside. Now, for decades, we're trying to agree now to reopen it with certain on certain element, and if you want, I can develop on this. The 4th point that I find is very important as well.
5th point. You did 4 already.
Sorry?
5th point.
No, 4th one.
Oh, right, we did 4.
1 is the cane, 2nd is transparency, 4th is tradition. Respect tradition and also diversity within an island, because there are different ways of doing things. That's the 3rd point. And the 4th point is leave room for innovation. Because I tell you, the first time I went to the Caribbean and I saw some rum producers, and one of my mentors was Lord Barnard from St. Lucia Distillers. And I was exposed, and I was actually blown away by the richness of the culture of rum. The fact that one island does it differently than another, that a producer has a special way or has a special still, for example. You have at West Indies Rum Distillery, a still that we put back together, which is a chamber still, Vulcan still. That's the heritage of rum, and that's so unique to rum. There's one, it's in the Caribbean. There's the use of column, and there's use of pot, and there's retort, and there's the mug pit, and there's all these incredible inventions that I as a guy who was trained as a master blender in Cognac, I have so much respect for, and that I found humbling.
Yeah.
So I think these are the 4 principles that we believe in and that we tend to live by. So on the elements, I see this, and I must say, I was told there was no PowerPoint, by the way, so it seems to be a PowerPoint.
No, it's only mine.
So I'm not able to show you anything because, some of the elements and discussions, and I'm glad to see in the Richard's presentation, there's movements that actually we can move toward together. There was a big debate on yeast, for example. And I feel yeast is something also that rum has a lot to talk about, to teach about. I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but when I arrived in the Caribbean, think about a little French redneck arriving in the Caribbean and seeing, the way distillation was done. When at that point, being a Cognac guy, I'm married to a very fine American lady, so I'm reminded once in a while that the French guys are a bit snobbish, and all that, right?
French are not snobbish.
So you're being French again, But I was like, we are distilling in a pot still in Cognac. And so I was prejudiced, I must admit. I say, we're true spirit, it's aged in a pot still. Then you know what? Going to the Caribbean and saying beautiful rums made in column, my mind evolved. I said, there's something that I'm learning here that I should be open to. So that's the same with yeast. You know, like if we limit ourselves to ça, comme c'est say yeast, I think it's an unfortunate limitation, especially if you look at the work of some incredible rum makers or scientists of the late 1800s. There's some incredible work that has been done in the Caribbean about different type of yeast, in that case cultured yeast. So I think we should be open to these possibilities and put it there. So that's where I think we have to really be careful, and we have to try to find a consensus. I mean, it's not easy, but the discussions I think are fruitful, to find something we're really willing to live by for many years to come, and that will leave room for guys, as some of you know, what made me wake up, and my team wake up in the morning. And the team at West Indies Rum Distilleries feel very strongly about this. In fact, Don Ben and Andrew Hassel, who runs the distillery, are even more extreme on this than me, to say, let's not give up on some of the pillars of what was done. Let me to be a little bit controversial.
To make it short, because we have time for questions as well.
But just to be a little controversial here, for example, where it's aged.
Okay.
I really respect tropical aging. I think this is great.
Yeah.
The history of rum was integrating both, but there is a double aging factor that's also part of rum history. So how do we reconcile that? Do we just say this is the past, we forget it, this is gone, we're not going to do this? Somebody was saying we should reverse history. Or should we, on the other hand, say, well, both are part of the history of rum for a long time. Why don't we agree to be transparent and put it on the label?
So you're saying, so if it is double aged, where if I take a rum from Jamaica and I want to bring it down up to Scotland, as long as I say it's made in Jamaica and finished or aged in Scotland, that should be on the label.
2 years in Barbados, 1 year in Scotland, for example. And we have shown scientifically something really interesting that blew me away. When you put rum in barrels and they ship inside the barrel.
You have to roll you in and take it up all the time.
No, but I'm just finishing on this. I want you to know that I would be sorry we give that up. There is an esterification that is happening because of, we did another experience recently, 48 grams per hectoliter in 45 days of transportation. So why would we give that up? I wouldn't like to give it up. I think this is an important factor.
Okay.
Thank you.
It is. I suppose it is an important factor. And again, as I said at the start, it depends on our audience. We have a very small percentage of people that we will define as rum geeks. They're going to understand that. But the majority of the audience, Esther's going to be way over their heads. But again, that's time for another occasion. But speaking of, I'm going to get to you, Joy, in a second, because I know you want to read that. Speaking of regions, areas, Nicole, you work in Ireland, you work in Kentucky, you're also part of I wouldn't say the American Distillers, you're a part of the craft movement when it comes to spirits over here. What is your view from coming from the outside on the whole rum, and also what's this all about?
Definitely will happily get to that. So I would say I agree kind of broadly with what both of you were saying about sort of the relative values of GIs, but I think it's useful to recognize there's two different paths kind of to this like idea of protecting something that have different merits and possibly could be useful in rum. So I agree, and I kind of wrote down what I think of as the characteristics of a successful regional identity, like what's important to have.
Take note.
I'll be happy to hand out all my notes later. I think it should be genuinely distinct in a way that's clearly recognizable in the liquid. So like if it doesn't point to a characteristic in the liquid like fruity or something that a consumer can understand, it doesn't matter what rules you wrote down, because if the liquids aren't similar, then your category's never going to get anywhere as a group. It has to have an authentic connection to the place that it's from, but I do think it particularly matters what that connection is. So whether it's yeast or maturation or but it has to be like really and truly connected to that place in a way that's authentic. And you have to, I think it should be objective and not subjective, because from an enforcement perspective, as soon as you have subjective rules, you're opening an opportunity for unfairness in the way that it's the way that it's regulated, and so that's always going to cause kind of discord and prevent you from moving forward. So objective rules like percentages, I think these are the way to go. When you get into subjective things like, like not more than a barrel color or something, like what's your standard? These questions are going to be really challenging. And I think it also has to be something that you can explain to a consumer, right? So if you get like way too in the nitty-gritty of it, like the 5 of us that can understand it are really passionate about it, but the entire rest of the world gives like 0 fucks. So it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Congratulations, right? And I think that you've got to thread the needle, right? And you said all of these things, right? You have to protect quality and consistency because your category doesn't have any meaning if a consumer can't come up with a reasonable expectation of what that bottle is going to taste like, and the bottle should consistently deliver on that. If you haven't met that bar, then it doesn't matter what your GI says. But you also have to allow for creativity, and I would actually reframe. We always use the word innovation, which I think brings to mind some things that maybe folks are like less than proud of or excited about. Over my left shoulder, like they think of innovations as like. Somehow like diminishing the value of a category, and so when you say that, people are like, oh, don't do that, right? Like, protect it, standards, always the same, forever and ever, hundreds of years. But in actuality, like, we live in a changing world, and if your GI can't respond to that, like, climate change that's going to affect your supply chain, and you limit yourself to like a particular region, or like growing regions are going to change. Like, this is coming, like supply chains are going to change. Like, all of these things are for sure coming, and if you can't respond to those changes that are coming, then like the commercial viability of the industry that you just went to all this trouble to protect is going to be completely undermined. So if you don't have an opportunity to kind of adjust and respond to those changes, you're really screwing yourself over. So I think you need to think about that when you're creating a GI. And I also think you should think about, there's 2 paths, right? So there's 2 ways to go to kind of achieve this similar goal of like protecting a regional identity. So one of them, you can pass laws, right? So you can create like an officially recognized GI, you can pass local laws. So examples of this are like bourbon and rye whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, which I also make now. These have their rules have been codified in laws, so either state or federal laws.
But if you buy a Tennessee whiskey, or you buy one of those whiskey regions, and it's taken out of the region, can you still call it that name? Or the consumer, even if the consumer doesn't know about it, can you still call it Tennessee whiskey?
So in order to be Tennessee whiskey, it has to be made in Tennessee. And we benefit, so when you go for the law route, that's when you benefit from the trade agreements, right? So like someone in Florida, it's a state rule, so Tennessee whiskey is not in the TTB standards of identity, but there's a Tennessee state law. But because of like reciprocal trade agreements inside the US, like someone in Florida couldn't call something Tennessee whiskey. Right, because of those agreements. So it's protection, right? And I think that's the main benefit when you go that route. You've now, if you go to the like passing laws route, you now have people that are not on your staff who are defending you, right? Who are protecting it, who are regulating this, who are ensuring that the rules are followed, and they will go out and fight on your behalf, like with U.S. like marketing agencies. There's people that are working on behalf of bourbon that I'm not paying, and that's very helpful and nice. And there are also there's a staff of people that are responsible for enforcing the rules. There's another route, and we did this for Empire Rye in New York State, so there's another option, right, which is...
Oh yeah, this is a rum center, I'll be clapping for Empire Rye.
It's totally fine if at this moment you're like, what is Empire Rye? I've legit never heard of that. We're new. But I was one of the 6 producers that founded Empire Rye, and we took another path. So we did not want to make a camel, right? Like we thought if we opened it up to like trying to pass a law, it would get so wrapped up into kind of like debates around like what it should or shouldn't be. So we just kind of had 6 producers that got together in a room and created a nonprofit company and all of us sat on the board of directors of that company. And then we copyrighted and like owned IP of this particular name, this particular category, and also like a little seal that went with it and protected it that way. So we didn't have to pass any laws.
Right. So all of the whiskeys within that little region have to, so that then as a consumer, you know that you're going to get quality and consistency from that.
And so if someone puts Empire Rye on the label, like you don't have an agency protecting you, but you can sue them, right? You can sue them for infringement. And so that's basically where the protection comes. And it's helpful in that it's quite changeable, right? Like, so for example, we came up with our set of rules and then realized like about a year in that one of them was real dumb and changed it. like we just all got together on a conference call and agreed, and then that was it, and we didn't have to go like lobby for 10 years, you know, in order to make that happen. So especially for new, like when you've got a lot of new craft people, I think that's very helpful because you don't know, you know, how it's going to work, so you get to like try it out. Okay. So that's quite useful, but no one, if you want to export it, like no one's off fighting for it, it's just on you. But it's quite useful, and I think you can go, to me the ideal path is actually to like start with that kind of agreement, and then get it sort of mature, and then codify it in law, so that you have that advanced like layer of protection.
Joy, you wanted to comment on?
Say something very quickly that our Jamaican GI does not hamper innovation. That's it.
No innovation in Jamaican GI?
Doesn't hamper innovation.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, wow, okay. Can you explain that a little bit more? No, so you're not allowed to change or adapt the GI at all in any way?
No, because our GI was carefully crafted to allow for innovation.
Oh, right, so it allows for innovation. Okay. So the Jamaican GI...
You gotta be careful, you can innovate reggae to something like jazz, but it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing.
Oh, right, okay. Well, reggae and jazz, it could be a good thing. Why not? Why not? Bailey, you're a bit quiet here. You actually have a brand, a Barbados brand. When you actually bought your brand, was being from Barbados instrumental into where you actually source your raw materials for? And why bottle in Barbados and not somewhere else like in Florida, Jacksonville, something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a huge factor. I mean, the story of our brand linked to Barbados, so that's what brought me to the island initially. But when I first started working with Richard about 10 years ago, you know, one of the very first questions I asked of him was, you know, I'm interested in buying this rum, and I want it to be authentic to what Bill McCoy would have had back in 1920 on the deck of his ship. What would that have been? And he said, well, that would be an unadulterated rum because people weren't doing that stuff back then. That's all we make. And so it seemed like a good fit. And I said, well, you know, not really knowing a whole lot about how the industry worked 10 years ago, I looked at this and said, well, I should probably buy some from you and ship it up to the United States, and I can bottle it up there, and that would be a lot less expensive than bringing bottles down to Barbados, and it makes economic sense, right? And Richard says, absolutely not. And I said, why? And he said, because I want to employ my people, because Barbados spring water is 60% of what's in that bottle, that you will not end up with the same product, and I'm not going to have my name on something that leaves Barbados, gets changed in whatever even innocent way, and allow you to make that a Barbados rum and a Foursquare rum. And I said, I totally support everything you're saying. And so now we ship all of our bottles down there, we ship all of our glass down there, everything about Bill McCoy is made at Foursquare, and we're employing all those people. And you know, it dawned on me, I made a joke of that conversation with the Scotch Whisky Association a minute ago, because I actually agreed never to make a whiskey under the name The Real McCoy. I could make a gin, I could do whatever I want, right? Why would I limit myself like this? It's because I believe in what the Scotch Whisky Association is trying to do. They're trying to protect their history, their progeny, their culture, their technology, their identity, their brand, right? Who am I to suddenly make some fake thing that people think is from Scotland and sell it out in the marketplace? I think that would be atrocious. And so I believed it when I worked with Richard. I believed it when I agreed with my friends at the Scotch Whisky Association that I would not make a whiskey under the name Real McCoy. And quite frankly, I just think that it really doesn't matter about the innovation question, in my opinion, because you can make any rum you want. I can go to Barbados, I can make any rum I want. I can put, you know, dragon blood in there if I want to.
There is the Barbados dragon blood in there.
And I can still call it rum. I just can't call it Barbados rum, right? No one's telling me through innovation that I can't do whatever I want, right? I can be in Barbados and do anything. There's absolutely nothing about any of this that's limiting innovation in any way, shape, or form. You just can't call it Barbados rum. Because if you are changing that, and your intention is to take the 400-year history of these people, this culture, this tradition, I mean, are we really going to all just sit around and let people come in and change these rules who are not from these areas, who never had anything to do with this before? Right? Are we really going to just let that happen? The birthplace of rum? I think, honestly, it's kind of absurd that we even have to have a conversation like this. Because in the long run, what we have is tradition, culture, and history. Joy represents this for Jamaica. She is the rock of Jamaica.
Wow, I've heard that quote before. I am the rock of Jamaica.
And Richard's family is the last of the Barbadian rum experts to own a distillery on the island. They're all not owned by a Barbadian family anymore. And so you're literally one heartbeat away from not having complete control over Barbados traditional family-made rum.
Don't tell Larry Warren that he's not a Barbadian.
No, and I've talked to Larry about this, and I meant, what I said was rum expert owner, and Larry says, I'm not an expert, I've been learning from Richard. It's the same way I've been learning from Richard for 10 years. You know, and it's kind of funny because I've been peppering Richard with questions for 10 years now, and I've been apprenticing with him. And I just bought my own still, but I will never call myself even a distiller, let alone a master distiller, until he calls me a distiller.
That's not
I'm
going to
not going to
happen.
call myself, it's never happened. I know that, I'll always be an apprentice. I'm never going to call myself a master distiller until both of them call me that, right? Because that's what it really entails. You can't just buy something and suddenly, you know, I'm going to buy a huge farm and now I'm a farmer, right? You don't know anything at all about basic farm science. Why are you calling yourself a farmer? I don't know anything about rum making. I buy a still, suddenly I'm a master distiller because I wrote a check. It makes absolutely no sense. And that's the problem with rum, is that we're sort of plagued with the absence of information all the time. We've all looked at rum throughout all of our lives and said, wow, rum is light gold and dark, right? Have you ever heard of a gold bourbon or a dark cognac, right? Of course not, it's ridiculous. So because we don't see the absence of something, we just take it for granted. We just hear these things over and over again that say stuff like rum has no rules. The reality is, you've got tradition, culture, history that's extremely legitimate. And just like every other region that now has a codified rule, they all had a non-written rule before that time period. And in that time period, they all worked together, they all did things the same way, they all culturally stuck together and did these things. And now when you have outside interests come in and say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it sideways, just so that I can innovate, that's not an answer. Just so that I can create something that might potentially in the future someday I might have to change because something might happen. I totally respect the environmental statement and all that, but the reality is there's a certain way that these things are made. It's what gives it its identity. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, go look at a TGI Fridays menu, and right there on the TGI Fridays menu it says Kobe beef burgers. Right? Kobe beef burgers. Why am I bringing us there? Because the Japanese never got a trademark on that name Kobe in the United States.
Like,
so
the guy that played for the Lakers didn't do it either.
What's that?
The guy that played for the Lakers, he never got registration.
No, Kobe didn't get it. So what's happened now, we have a brand name that the world started to respect, Kobe beef. And suddenly it's on every fast food menu on the planet because somebody didn't get the trademark for it. And so now it's completely, de-emphasized the strength, the interest, the character, the culture, the traditions. These people were making steaks that cost $500, and all of that stuff is now gone. Same thing is going to happen in Barbados. The same thing is going to happen in Jamaica. Same thing will happen in Martinique if we don't have an understanding of a core structure to their traditions, culture, and history, and not just give it to somebody who wants to put a few shekels of silver in their pocket.
Wow, powerful. I want to go to the audience because I know there's loads of people, loads of questions and that type of stuff. I know we're not pressed for time, so I have a little bit of time as well. But does anyone have any questions they want to ask our panel in regards to potential geographical indications or just a general comment? You, sir.
We talked about age statement in rums, and I want to know what do you guys feel about also asking the question or even promoting, how about sugar content or other additives put on the bottle, because sometimes we don't really know exactly what we're drinking exactly. I know some people add sugars, some people don't. Would that be something beneficial or not in the rum world to put on the bottle for at least a consumer point of view? Like sugar, like basic sugar content, and what else is in this rum?
Good question. Anyone want to answer that?
I'll just give you one thing, and I'll hand it over to Alexandre. If you want to learn about sugar right now, go on your cell phones and go to drecon.dk, D-R-E-C-O-N.dk, and you can look up on the list of rums measured, every rum, just about every rum you've ever heard of, and it shows you exactly how much sugar has already been added to these rums. And this is Johnny Dreyer's fantastic work. Alco Finland also does this. FRP in France measures these things now. So the European Union puts this stuff out there. So if you want to know how much sugar is in your favorite rums, go to drecon.dk, drecon.dk.
Alexandre, you want to comment?
I think it's a great point and it's a great question. Again, it relates to transparency. Thanks for that question. I think it's important. I think, this is already mandatory for food products. It's going to become mandatory for spirits, and I'm glad about this. I think it puts a lot of question at peace, but me as a consumer, I want to know what I'm drinking. I want to know what I'm eating. And I think we should not only put contents, what's in there, but also calories. I mean, I have the right to know. A gram of sugar is 4 kilocalories. A gram of alcohol is 7 kilocalories. So, all this is the things that I think the consumer should be informed about. We have different views, on sugar, and it's too bad. I have my team in Barbados says, if he gets funny and tells you they prepared slides for me because they thought I may not have the possibility to put them on the screen. So if you're interested, see that when you're a bit of a rebel, you have to live with things like this. You're told, no, there's no slide presentation. But there are documentation preaching one way or another, and some people are interested. I can show you, and these documents are very ancient. So I'm not trying to be complicated, but when we talk about innovation, we're not talking about putting green stuff in rum and calling it whatever. The idea is not that, and some people do that. But we're not about that. We're about, I give you a very specific example. 1945, Cognac, this is just a fact, creates the GI and puts Cognac should be aged in oak barrels. Now, 1945, there was all the worries that to make a great GI. I mean, it's just after the war, so, And then we discovered in the years to come, by researching all documents, and if you're interested, I'll produce these documents for you, that a lot of great cognacs, there was a port and a cognac trader that was called Mr. Sanderman, that actually wrote about a lot of great cognacs were aged in chestnut barrels or acacia barrels. So guess what we did? We tried, that was 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, I apologize, and we aged it, and it's delicious.
Do you sell that? Is that?
We do, but we can't call it cognac.
Oh, you can't call it cognac?
Yet we're going back to one of the roots of cognac making. And I think it's unfortunate, and I say that respectfully. We have a debate right now, and we tend to say, okay, then now it's the consumer that should have these options. This is part of the heritage. This is something, so we do call it innovation. As you know, innovation is drawing from the past, drawing from the deep cultures, and using this, to create something that's fantastic and that's delicious.
Well, I know that was cool with your plantation team. They probably sell loads of it because they are good. Except for that guy with the glasses over there, he's not that good. But I think in that situation there, at least the consumer knows it's not cognac because it doesn't say cognac on there. I think there would be a problem if it said cognac on there and you're using a different type of wood. Sorry.
I think he's brought up an interesting point though, and I don't know much about cognac, but I think you have to be careful when you're talking about history and tradition, not to be arbitrary about which moment in time you're selecting as the moment that's what happened in the 1950s and the way everything was in the 1950s is the thing that's worth preserving forever. The thing that happened in the 1890s is doesn't matter. Or if you're picking an arbitrary moment in time as the one that you want to codify forever and protect forever, I think you have to really think hard about whether that's actually right and whether that's actually the right moment and what that's the thing that's worth protecting.
Okay, that makes common sense. I was having a conversation with Ben, and he was saying to me that the AOC, they've revisited quite a few times to change and tweak the AOC there because they've realized they've had to adapt. And I know you said 30 years for a GI in Europe. That's right. 30 years. I'm sure there'll be, because of development model, if something's not right, something's not wrong, I'm sure we can go back and change, tweak things up. How many times the AOC changed in the last, how many years?
The AOC Martinique was ratified in 1996, so now we are 23 years, and it's been revised 3 times.
No, that's it.
Oh, sorry. I think I know. But yes, no, it was revised, and there is an independent commission in Martinique responsible for that, which all of the producers at Martinique have a position, an equal, fair position, into this independent association that governs the AOC in Martinique. And yes, the changes were made, a little bit like what you said, Nicole, that in 1996 they decided on specific sugarcane varietals and specific parcels of land you can do, and because of certain changes, and of course maybe the increase of demand, everyone comes back together and makes a decision. Okay, we need to look at this. We may make a modification, but we respect the DNA of the original spirit. So of course, it's only from sugarcane juice and sugarcane from Martinique, and the typical traditional method of production. But yes, you can tweak a few characteristics and elements to continue to preserve and protect your traditional style. Because if we run out of sugarcane, we're not going to be making any more rum. And the world will be deprived of the greatest rum in the world.
Bias, good. Okay. Speaking of, I'll get to you. Speaking of sugars in rum, of course we have rums from Venezuela, which you allow, according to your DOC, you're allowed to add sugars to rums. As such, we have Nelson Hernandez, the master distiller of the Cognac rums. But it's one of the things it's funny, when I speak to bartenders around the world and we mention Diplomatico, similar to Bacardi, we always think of one brand or one SKU. We forget that there are other products in the portfolio. Are all your rums sweet and sugared according to your DOC? Oh, sorry, you got to translate that as well.
Sorry, my English is like a kindergarten.
We have no restrictions in the use of sugar. We have some rums, like half of our portfolio are rums, like the 1, 2, and 3 are rums who have 0 sugar added. People, when they think Diplomatico, because it's 90% of our total production by choice of the customer, not by us. We put the rums out there and people are the ones who actually choose them. Yeah, it has sugar added and it's stylistically what we decide. It's like you making your soup. But I think it's more about respect, and I think like each country should be respected for what they do. I shouldn't go to your kitchen and tell you how to do rum, and you shouldn't come to me. I mean, like us as a country, from Venezuela, we have a DOC since 2003. About 17 producers came together and they realized what was Venezuelan rum for them, and has worked for us. And right now we're undergoing the largest economic crisis in 300 years. So who are you to tell me that if I don't bottle in Venezuela, my rum is not Venezuelan? If I cannot get bottles in, if you cannot get bottles in Barbados, or if you cannot get bottles, like, what are you going to do? Am I going to stop feeding my people? No. We're going to bottle the rum and we're going to make sure that it's our product and that we feel it is Venezuelan. But we shouldn't be so strict, but we need to more respect like each other's kitchens and enjoy and promote rum as a whole. I think like when we are pointing, you add sugar, you add this, we are divided. Bourbon, they are going skyrocket because they are united. It's a united like front. But we as rum drinkers and rum lovers, we need to come together and like really let the customer make the choice. We need to be clear what we're doing. But let the customer be the judge and tell you, this is what I like this, and we present the best we can. And I think like that's what it is. Respect and let the customer decide. That's it.
And Ian, I just want to can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
I just want to say, I don't think that adding sugar is wrong.
I agree.
I don't think sweetening, I don't think these are bad things. He makes an unbelievably beautiful pineapple rum. I mean, fantastic stuff, right? It's really great. I mean, just
pineapple rum,
I mean, so the whole point is you should be able to do whatever you want to do. And nobody should ever be telling you guys how to make your rums. I think the rums are fantastic, and I know Tito Cordero, the great stuff you guys are doing. So that's really key. Also because you guys never lied to anybody about adding sugar. You were always very transparent about that. So respect to you guys for being really honest and open the whole time.
don't want to make it up cold, though.
No, I just want to add, I think you hit something on the head with, I think you have to be really clear about what the goal of the GI is. And when you expect it to solve other problems that are outside of that, is when you fall down and the whole structure of the thing falls apart. Like the goal of regional identity is to either create or protect the diverse group of producers that is from that place in that region and supporting their commercial viability over very, very long term, right? That's the goal. And if you take anything beyond that, like if the goal is to like create some particular economic outcome or create some, or solve a marketing problem, like you've stepped outside the goal of the GI and it's gonna fall down on its face because that's not what it's for and you've chosen the wrong tool.
Okay, so it's for protection, it's to protect. And do you want to make a comment on that, Rich? Joy? Before I go to the audience? Do you have a microphone there? I've only got one, so one mic for 200 people. It's terrible, terrible. Joy?
Yes, where Jamaica is concerned, we are not against anybody adding sugar. We have just said that we have two categories of rum in Jamaica. Flavored rums, where you can add any amount of sugar you want and any amount of flavors. But our premium age rums, it is our regulation and law that states that we will not add sugar to our rums because we, right now there is no requirement for nutritional information on rums. And millennials, who are now the next target market, needs to know what's going inside their body. And if it's not on the label, they're not sure what's happening to them. And we just want to make that clear that, you know, if sugars are going to be added, then somehow it should be communicated. And we're just not against adding sugar, but for Jamaica premium rums, we're just not going to add it as a policy.
Okay, I just want to add on to something Ian mentioned earlier and actually bring it up to a question for Ben and for Joy. So we talk a lot about how the U.S. does not recognize like a Martinique rum or a Jamaican rum, things like that, and the way that they do recognize Scotch whiskey, for example. However, I wanted to know why, so I actually went to the USTTB and I asked them, I said, why is it that you don't respect the rules of Jamaica or the rules of France, for example? Why are these not in there? And the response, and this is something I'm going to write up a very long form article very shortly, but the response was essentially, but the response was essentially, you're asking the wrong question. Essentially, what you want is a standard of identity. So it's a standard of identity that's going to get you into that list. So if you want a Martinique rum or Jamaican rum or Barbados rum to be in that list, you have to get the U.S. to give you a standard of identity. And I said, so what's the process for that? And essentially the answer boils down to you ask, and then we put it out for public comment. And if you go back in history, 2013, when Brazil did this with cachaça. Now cachaça is a recognized standard of identity. Because they asked, it went through public commentary, and it got approved. So then the question I have is, and I actually don't know the answer, the question I have is, for example, we have rules for French rum, or Martinique rum, sorry, and we have rules for Jamaican rum. Has these questions been asked? Has France and has Jamaica gone to the USTTB and asked, hey, can we have a standard of identity?
Great question, and definitely with the Brazil one, I actually met one of the guys down in Brazil that was instrumental in getting Brazil reclassified as cachaça from Brazilian rum, but part of that was also blackmailing America, that they wouldn't recognize American whiskey in Brazil, and don't mess with American whiskey, guys. So maybe Worst could do this. Blackmail America and say we're not going to recognize American whiskey in any of the Caribbean islands that we represent until you recognize our standard of identity. But that's my simplest idea.
So Ian, to address Matt's comment, actually there's an organization that has recently been formed called the Guardians of Rum. And the whole purpose of the Guardians of Rum is to help organize, give people who are concerned about this stuff to get involved and be a part of this. And the whole point is to get the United States government and the European Union to recognize the rules of these various countries. And so Maggie is a big part of this in the United States on the independent craft spirit side. But we have a whole group of people, and I think we have about a dozen brands now that have all come together to be a part of Guardians of Rum. And if everybody wearing the blue t-shirts, Gail, and you guys stand up for a second because you got to show everybody these t-shirts. Protect Barbados Rum. Save Barbados Rum. So the whole point of this is to to build the political will in the United States to understand that these issues exist, to get them to recognize the rules of Barbados and Jamaica and Martinique, all the regions, Puerto Rico even, to get those things identified as well. We want to get everybody together who really want to protect these things, consumers who want to get involved, we have bar owners who want to get involved. We're starting a group called the Guardians of Rum, and you'll all be able to join us and sign petitions, and we'll submit this to the government and try to really help out rum in America and in Europe.
I was just going to answer Matt's question, but...
I was just going to add, so also to answer your question, so there was just a reopening of the TTB standards of identity, and that went out for public comment. That actually just closed. But as part of that, the American Craft Spirits Association submitted public comments, right? So it's different than like lobbying for regular law and quantity matters. Like there's organizations that have a stronger voice, right? And so recognizing that responsibility, the American Craft Spirits Association, in our public comments and our responses to the TTB, we actually, besides suggesting a couple of specific regional rum identities that be integrated, we also took it a little step farther and suggested some generic recognitions. So recognizing that in the US there's a lot of movement. We're in a somewhat similar position like in craft whiskey that I think rum is in right now, where there's a lot of regions, like Missouri is trying to pass a law right now. We have Empire Rye, of course, in New York. The Texas Whiskey, their association just got together and is working on codifying rules. So we saw that we would have this need, and all of those people are interested in exporting, right? So we proposed like a generic recognition, essentially that every single person who has like a GI standard, that they not necessarily have to come individually to the TTB to get a standard of identity, but we propose that like anything that has kind of meets these standards. Of course, I can't remember exactly what they are, my concussion brain, but we said like, essentially if you have an organization that's agreed a codified set of rules, that it should sort of automatically be recognized in the US. And that we would expect the same for ours, right? So that if that reciprocity was met, that should be enough, and it shouldn't have to necessarily go through this like additional challenging, comments. So who's to say whether they'll accept that or not? But we made an attempt.
Maggie, you wanted to say something?
I want to thank Nicole because she was really instrumental in making all of that really hardcore legal language go through, and it was language mimicking a lot of the rules around Kinshasa for agricole, for Jamaica to say, and for Barbados and for Clarence, and saying that if these, it reflects the laws in Jamaica, and that when Barbados has their GI, it reflects the laws of Barbados. And so therefore you are, as you said, setting your own rules. We're not saying what it is. It needs to reflect yours. So I really appreciate you taking that on, because coming from the ACSA, which is such a large organization, it has so much more meaning. I have a kind of key question for Joy. I brought notes. My background also involves wine, and so yeast physiology was a big concentration for me. And I know that one of the reasons we were all brought here today was a very lively discussion around yeast. And since you have the Jamaican experience in chemistry, I wanted to ask you that there was a discussion around narrowing to one genus of yeast, wiping out hundreds of years of history of rum making, narrowing to one path, and sort of a discussion around leading to the 1970s mainly for efficiency and consistency. Narrowing the path like this can lead to standardization. You know the quote I'm referring to? Limiting sessions led to the standardization of many foods and drinks categories. A very relevant example is one of the industries. Basically saying that Saccharomyces cerevisiae, being the only yeast added, would wipe out the diversity and the complexity and the richness of fermentation in Jamaican rum. And coming from my wine background, where I study AOCs and DOPs and all these things very intensely, I wasn't able to follow that conversation, and I wanted to ask you if you would discuss that a little bit about, there was a discussion about if Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the only yeast allowed to be added in Jamaica, would this get rid of the history of wild fermentation in Jamaica?
Yes, that was clearly a misunderstanding. What we stated was that should be one of the yeast strains. We have no restriction on yeast strains, nor a type of bacteria that we use in our fermentation.
Well, I know that Hamden, when you use yeast, do you? You guys use that Dunder, Muck, and all that type of stuff, natural yeast. Any other questions quick to the panel, because I know time is running out? You journalist.
Yeah. So with the congratulations on your new GI rules, Joy. I'm just wondering, I've heard earlier this year that there was a question of reopening the rules around the added sugar, and I know you just mentioned you've got sort of two separate rules for rums, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this reopening of these rules that you've just put in place.
Well, as it relates to sugar, it remains as is. No sugars will be added to Jamaica rum. End of story.
Any other questions here? Good chance to ask questions to these 5 legends. Oh, sorry, 4 legends and Bailey. Over here. Smart looking first over here.
Just wanted to read another statement from my great friend Maggie, who's in my backyard in the North Shore in the lovely Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I saw a video of Alexandre recently discussing rum's protected origins and GIs and AOCs, and having the perspective I do from the wine world, I could not have agreed with him more. I think a lot of people don't understand the limitations and artificial nature of such rules on an organic cultural process and expression. It freezes everything at a random moment when truly these processes have ever been changing. That was from me last year.
Anyone want to respond to that? No? Oh, you want to make it quick,
I don't know what that was in regards to. I think that absolutely. I've seen in the wine world where times that a lot of restriction can cause certain issues, health in vineyards, etc. But what I've been seeing in this last year, particularly in wine, that has really changed me as a person, especially within the Masters of Wine, which is such a traditional institution that really likes to follow the rules, in which I've sort of been spending a lot of my time, is unending innovation in wine. Cloudy wine, pet nat wine. And what it's become is these younger generations, they don't buy into those names as they used to. You know, Bordeaux doesn't just mean Cabernet, it means a lot of things. And as I got deeper and deeper through my education, it became important to me to see, you know, in the heart of Burgundy, talking to a Burgundian winemaker saying, I'm just not going to put Burgundy on my label because I want to do what I want to do. I can literally call it anything else. And I'm going to do what I want, and it doesn't keep me from doing anything. But then when someone does want to buy Burgundy, they can. So for me, the experiences I've had in the last year experiencing natural wine, seeing these alternatives, they really, really opened my eyes that, well, just because it says Tuscany doesn't mean you can't make a super Tuscan, doesn't mean you can't do these other things. And those are some of the most exciting products that get the most attention. And for me, I think I really needed a lot more time to go out and see those things.
No, really quick, and I've followed this debate with a lot of interest. There's something I think that's crucial. We are at a turning point for rum. I think we need to do this right, but also very importantly, I encourage everybody, and I mean this wholeheartedly, we need to be side by side and together. We need to be unified. We need to be in a situation. This is so important because, you know, if we go at one another and poking at one another on this, who loses? Not your competitor. Who loses is rum. And I totally respect somebody that will disagree with the values of what we believe. I totally respect this. And I think if we take pokes at each other like this, one product loses. Again, it's rum, and other wonderful, rums we lose. So my only dream here is that we can bubble up, respect one another and what we do, as long as it is honest and transparent. And yes, it is a tribute to tradition, but also we want to be able to, like you said, review different areas of tradition and so on. And the people who make rum now, and I speak with our whole team at West Indies Rum Distillery, they want to be able to create and draw from the past. They want to do this, and I'm here to tell you this in their name. So to me, let's do this together, and let's do it in a unified way. Thank you.
And this is one of the quotes I saw online out there, which actually typifies some of that. GIs don't stifle innovation or creativity, only what language you use on the labels. To say otherwise is disingenuous. Make what you want and where you want, follow the labeling laws, and if it's good or interesting, people will still buy it. And I think it stands out if you, for me personally, you have a Jamaica rum and it's from Jamaica and it follows the rules and regulations of Jamaica, you should be able to call it Jamaican rum. But if Jamaica says that is not Jamaica rum, listen to them. Barbados says that is not Barbados rum, listen to them. If Ben says that is, well, not Ben, the powers that be, if they say, if Martinique says what you do there, yes, we made it, but that is not Martinique rum. We should follow the rules and regulations there. It's simple for me, but I'm just a simple rum drinker as such. You want to make a quick comment?
Just to emphasize that, I mean, the EU has the specific regulations to recognize GIs, and they also have the, if you might say, the mirror of that. And so what they have is the ability. The EU speaks of provenance. You know, we speak of origin, and origin's an old-fashioned word because we think of something being made where it originated, but of course today you can make things in many parts of the world. So yes, you could ferment a rum in Barbados and then, you know, age it in Europe. And so in the EU speak of provenance, and so they specifically allow you to use the provenance where the essential characteristics are happen. So, for example, Scotland actually prohibits the production of any other whiskey other than compliant Scotch whiskey. So, in other words, you can't make another whiskey, you know, product of Scotland. So, but they are whiskeys sold in Europe that were distilled in Scotland. They're not Scotch whiskey. What happens is there's an example of a French one and there's an example of a Spanish one. They take the distilling out of Scotland and it goes over to France or it goes over to Spain. It's aged there, and guess what? It says whiskey product of Spain, whiskey product of France. So this is very, very important. You know, what we're really talking about is semantics and identity. We're not talking about constraining. And again, he makes it the point. The consumer, yes, will buy what they want, but the consumer is also entitled to be informed before they buy what they want.
Okay, well, sorry about the whole time if you were about to get kicked out here, but we could probably have, I should have done what I did last year and actually put 2 seminars in and did part 1 and part 2. Maybe for next year if they let me into the country. But anyway, but guys, yeah, we could be talking about this for days, and I'm sure the conversation will go on and on and on and on. But I think the most important thing, one of the best things I've heard out today is the fact that we are all in this together. They do say yes. Rising tides, floats, all types of ships. Is that what they say, Ben? Is that the same? I think you heard it. Rising tides, no ships will rise. Let's make sure each ship is from individual countries who know exactly what's in that ship. That's all in my own interpretations. But anyway, I definitely want to thank these amazing guests here for giving up the time to educate and share knowledge with us. Mr. Richard Seale from Foursquare Distillery, Dr. Joyce Spence from Geographical Indications, Mr. Benny Bryan, our future employer from Rum, and the amazing Greece, I think Nicole wants to speak in the ball. And Mr. Alexandre Gabriel of Plantation Podcast. More importantly, you guys, thanks again. And hopefully we can do another version of this next year, as such, if they don't get bored or I don't get banned from the country.